Yeah, one might think that I could get my hands on this a lot earlier since living in Japan and all, but no, I had to do like everyone else. Luckily, my local bike shop managed to secure me one of these launch kits that comes in this way over the top box. So the plan for this video is to get all these parts on the scales, check that actual weight. We all know the advertised weight might not really tell the whole story always. I will also compare them to the previous generation, at least the parts I have. Yes, see how much lighter or heavier they become. It will be interesting to see how much total weight I will be able to shave off going to this setup, although I won't use every single part. More on that later. I will also do the initial configuration for the Di2 as well as bleeding the brakes, so we can see if there's anything new we need to be careful of there. And as usual, if you want to skip ahead to something, check the timestamp below. But yeah, let's start. Let's get into this and check some weights. So let's start with the brake shift levers or STI levers. These new Darth Vader looking hoods has definitely put on some mass. These basically came in an OEM configuration, which means the olive, the hose nut and brake fluid is already in the lever. So with that in mind, the weight is 368 grams for the pair. A hose nut is 5 grams alone, so 10 grams for the pair, which means 358-ish grams for this set. Comparing that with the old levers at 325 grams for the set, so adding 33 grams, not the best start. Comparing them in hand with the previous 9170 levers here, they have gotten bigger for sure, and as reported, they have a few millimeters longer reach. I wouldn't say it feels massive here, but it is noticeable next to each other. They do feel nice, and one good thing about the slightly taller bump is that when you're in the TT position with the pinky below the lever, for me I can grip the hood with all my fingers, unlike the old one where my pointy finger don't really have space to grab onto that bump. The top buttons though seems a bit harder to push, but that could be more of a case of just getting used to it. We'll just have to see out on the bike. The brake calipers also came in the same OEM configuration with the hoses already installed and filled with brake fluid. I was tempted to disassemble them, but I thought of another way to get the weight of the caliper alone. But first, just to see the complete weight with hoses and brake pads, we're looking at 145 grams for both front and rear. So to get the weight of the caliper alone, I removed the brake pads and the front mounting adapter. The weight came out to 112 grams. Then I weighed an old brake hose cut to the exact same length, including the hose nut, olive and insert. That was 23 grams, which means the caliper alone is around 88 grams. Maybe take another gram off for brake fluid, but I don't like the guessing, so 88 grams it is. The 9170 brake caliper is 95 grams. So a weight saving of 7 grams. It's better than nothing. Here you can also see the new bleed port that Shimano is so proud of, even though they have the exact same system on their older post-mount road brakes. Slightly easier bleeding maybe, more on that later, but one thing I'm a bit worried about is how fast I will lose these rubber plugs. Yeah, we'll see. Moving on to the front derailleur. Look and feels tiny compared to the old 9170. The shiny black outer plate looks nice, but I wonder how this super shiny finish will look after some time. No more limit screws either, only the support screw. Everything is adjusted with the app. More on that later. Weight is pretty damn sweet at 90 grams compared to 100 grams for the 9170. 10 grams in the bank. happy with that. The rear mech actually don't look super different from the old one if I remember correctly. Unfortunately, I don't have that for a side-by-side comparison. The charging port, Bluetooth functionality and the new max capacity of a 34-tooth cassette means the weight has actually gone up a bit from the previous generation, coming in at 211 grams. For me, it will replace the GRX 815 with a clutch at 289 grams. So for my setup, I will actually save 78 grams here, so happy days. Another place I don't have a direct comparison to make is the cassette. But anyway, I now have 12 cogs to play around with and the weight is 223 grams. A lot of people seem to be super happy to have this 16 teeth cog now on this 11 to 30 cassette. For me, I'm more stoked that I will save 46 grams over my 1130 Ultegra cassette that I've been using previously. Also, here you can see the new spline pattern that will fit a standard 11-speed HG free hub, as well as the new Shimano dedicated 12-speed ones. So very happy about this. Now, I'm not going to use the new crank at all, actually. Part because it's a semi-compact crank, 5236. But the biggest reason is that it's heavy. Well, at least it's heavier than what I have now. So this 9200 semi-compact with 170mm arms is 689 grams. I will keep using my Easton EC90 compact that is exactly 100 grams lighter until, yeah, well, we will have to see what the future holds. Now, one thing I was really keen to find out is how much weight would be saved on the new Di2 cables. And the fact that there's no junctions and only 2 cables in total. As you can see, the new Di2 cables are much smaller, both the connectors and the cable themselves. The battery has exact same dimension as the older battery, with only change being the 3 ports instead of only 1. So the complete Di2 wiring, junction boxes and battery I pulled out of my Emonda came in at 109 grams. The new battery plus 2 wires ends up weighing 72.8 grams, so that means 36 grams saved, and that basically offsets the added weight on the new SDI levers. Perfect. Now, as you probably know, the rotors and chain are not new, but just to complete the whole lineup, the 160mm rotors is 108 grams, the 140mm one is 88 grams, with the uncut chain coming in at 249 grams. And that's it for the weights. So I won't do a whole step-by-step build here, as I've done a complete build video of the Emonda already. But in terms of stuff that stood out or was a bit different with the new Dura Ace, we have the calipers that now uses 2 different bolts, one with the locking tip thingamajig and the other one without. So just don't mix those up and you should be fine. The new Di2 cables are much smaller, as we saw. That means the Park Tool routing kit won't fit the new cables. I simply attached them with electrical tape, and luckily there are only 2 cables to deal with now, both going from the battery down the C-tube to each derailleur. I was happy to see I could still use that nifty little cable clip on the rear derailleur even with my direct mount hanger. While I never had any problem with the cable getting caught up in something, it definitely adds a bit of extra security. It turned out the cone cell batteries in the hood was already installed. I thought I would have at least had to remove some plastic or something, but nope, they were alive and kicking. Simple to change as well, but I would have liked to have a small hex screw instead of a Phillips head, since I don't have this tool on my current multi-tool. But you can't have it all, I guess. Doing the initial setup on the Di2 stuff was pretty simple as well. Putting the rear derailleur in Bluetooth mode, it shows up on the eTube app. Register the new parts as a new bike, so I know what is what. After that is registered, it takes you to the pairing of the levers or switches as they are called in the app. To pair the shift levers, you simply scan the QR code on the back of the shift lever with the app and you're good to go. From there you can of course go in and customize all the buttons, set up synchro shift and all that stuff, checking for new firmware updates, etc, etc. I'm not going to go deep into that. I simply configure my hidden top buttons to do the shifting up and down like I always have. For those who want to go really deep into all the nitty-gritty stuff about all the settings, definitely check out the Legend of Changelogs and all things regarding apps and bikes. That is of course GP Llama. Or if you're more of a reading type, check out bettershifting.com that covers all things Di2. Now for the brake bleeding, it's exactly the same as the previous generation. You can use the same bleed kits as before. You still need that dang bleed funnel adapter if you have the really old bleed funnels. The only real change apart from the new bleed block that you can now insert from above, which is nice, is that the bleed nipple is now separate from the open-close screw. So basically the same as the old Shimano post mount rolled calipers. So nothing revolutionary, but it definitely makes it a bit easier, especially at the back, whereas before the seat stays could get in the way of opening and closing that bleed nut. Since this OEM configuration came with brake fluid already in the hoses, the calipers and the brake levers, after connecting the hoses, I just did a quick gravity bleed, but I don't think even that was really necessary as the levers felt super firm even before the bleed. And in the end, I think I saw maybe 2 bubbles in the funnel, so yeah. But if you need a complete guide for bleeding a dry system, check my older tutorial linked in the description. It's the exact same process. Another thing that is exactly the same as the previous generation is the reach and freestroke adjustment. The reach is just behind the lever pivot point, as you can see here, with the freestroke just under the rubber hood a little further back. I've not played around with this enough yet to see if there's any significant improvements compared to the 9170, but I have an old video about all these adjustments that I will also leave down in the description. As you know, and I already mentioned, the cassette fits the old 11-speed HG free hub, no problem, but just to prove that, here's that going on a DT Swiss 180 hub, no problems. Correct chain length is easy determined by putting the chain on the big chain ring and the big cog in the back without going through the rear derailleur. Pull the chain tight on the chain ring, and where the chain meets, add either 2 or 3 links depending on whichever ends up with the inner plate, since we need those inner plates to attach a quick link. Simple as that. Adjusting the rear derailleur is exactly the same as the previous generation, or I guess it might be even easier now as we got this B-screw adjustment guide to set the guide pulley height. Just match the largest cog with the corresponding line on the guide and you're done. Indexing is the same as well. Put the chain in the 5th cog, go into adjustment mode by holding the button on the derailleur until the light turns orange. Then adjust the derailleur with the shift lever until you can hear a slight noise from the 4th cog. Then adjust in the opposite direction for about 5 clicks, and that's a good starting point. From here I usually do any fine-tuning out on the road. Only problem now is I need to press that button on the derailleur every time, and I can't really do it on the fly like when I had the Di2 junction in the handlebar end. So I guess that's the only one negative thing about not having a bar end junction anymore. But this should be a set and forget anyway. The front derailleur adjustment on the other hand is new. We don't have any adjustment screws at all apart from the support screw, so no high and low limit screws. Now if you do that adjustment in the app, and it actually walks you through the whole process and makes it super simple. It even shifts the derailleurs for you. Just remember to turn the cranks when it tells you to do so. So there's no need for me to explain how to do this. Simply follow the on-screen instructions. It's way easier anyway. You can actually do these adjustments on the older 9170 as well, even though you have those adjustment screws on the derailleur itself. As you can see, it works fine on my Eastern crankset as well. Probably not quite as smooth as it would on the Shimano crank, I would imagine, but I'm fine with sacrificing that last 2-3% for 100 grams in the bank. because I'm sick in the head. It's a sickness. So there we go, up and running. We have all the weights figured out and everything. If you paid really close attention there, you might have realized I have saved about 145 grams compared to the previous setup. In this current configuration, the bike is about 6.41 kilos. And that is with my heavier wheels and 32mm tires. So that's a good weight, but we still have stuff to do there, I promise. So I've only managed to do a quick little ride around the block yesterday in jeans and everything, just to check out that everything is shifting and braking as it's supposed to do, which it is. Smooth, nice, quick, just like Di2 always has been. So I will do a follow-up video on this once I have some proper distance under my belt. You obviously shouldn't take these videos as buying advice anyway, but there might be some people out there that are actually interested to hear how it works out long term. I just realized I forgot to set the limit screws on the rear mech. Yeah, that's a good thing about Di2, it's not that picky about that stuff. So I will go take care of that now, and yeah, if you want to, I will catch you in the next one. Peace.